Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Weekend Bible Study. I hope you've taken a look at the new website as it's being developed. We suddenly had a brand new look one day. My instructions to Daniel are not to worry about aesthetics right now, but to get the navigation established with all the departments and subdepartments in existence, even without full content. Just put something in there of the most current stuff we have. Once we have that in place, we can think about how the site looks, add graphics, add color. As you probably have guessed, this is a real headache, but it's important, and we will get there. I know Daniel would appreciate your prayers. We have little idea of how many people are joining us for this study, but our best estimates are in excess of 350, I think maybe even as much as 500. We have the same problem with live streaming, although we do know how many computers are online at any time, and it's gone up. This last week, I think we had over 70 computers online. The problem is we don't have any idea how many people are watching each computer. We know one guy, for example, is projecting it on the wall for 7 people at his house. So anyway, thank you for bearing with us in our experimental stage. We thought about calling ourselves the Experimental Church of God, but one of these days, sooner or later, we're going to pass that stage. So far in the new year, we haven't been forced to cancel any stations, although our budget is a bit thin. Larry watches things every day because we want to be faithful stewards of what God provides. For now, you have tuned in for a Bible study. There are no questions. I do have 2 comments to deal with, so grab a cup of coffee and a muffin, and let's begin. Diana Keener writes from Sylvania, Georgia, quote, "You ask what the significance of a non-Israelite grandmother in Jesus' line of birth might be. God intended from the very beginning to be the God of everyone, not just Israel. That is why I believe women like Ruth and Rahab are there. This is just speculation, but it was obvious to everyone that Ruth was a Moabite. She stood out in some way. Do we know for sure she was Caucasian? She might have been of another race." End quote. Well, yes, she might have been, but that assumes we agree on what we mean when we speak of race. Historically, men tend to recognize black, white, and yellow. These are the 3 big racial divisions, and anything else is not racial. They consider the 3 sons of Noah, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. The presumption is that Ham and Japheth had wives who were racially diverse. The Moabites, though, were not a different race per se. They were descendants of Abraham's brother, Lot. Actually, his nephew, I should say. Lot was the son of Abraham's brother. Now, the Moabites then would have been Semitic in that line. As far as why everybody spotted Ruth in that situation, Bethlehem was a small town, and everyone knew Ruth because of her story, not her race. You know how rumors spread in small towns and among little communities. Everybody knows everything about everybody else. Well, here comes Naomi back, and the whole town went on a buzz as a result of that. And it was no time at all till admiration grew for Ruth because of the way she had chosen to come home with Naomi to a strange land. So anyway, that's I think the answer to that. I don't think she was a different color. I don't think she was any more discernible from a Jew than an Arab would be. And whatever distinction there is not that big. The other comment we have today falls in the first chapter of Deuteronomy. So open your notebooks, open your Bible to Deuteronomy chapter 1, and let's get started. These are the words Moses spoke to all Israel in the desert east of Jordan, that is, in the Arabah, opposite Suf, between Paran and Tophel, Laban, Hazeroth, and Dizahab. It takes 11 days to go from Horeb to Kadesh Barnea by the Mount Seir road. Now, you could get lost in a hurry on that. If they were talking about Dallas and Austin and so forth to me down here, I would know where I was at. I recommend a place called BibleMap.org. It won't mark all of these places entirely, but it gives you a rough idea where all these places were. Moses mentions the Arabah. It didn't show on the map that I linked to, that is on BibleMap.com, but it's a continuation, the Arabah is, of the Jordan River. It's called Wadi Arabah, and Wadi in Arabic basically means an arroyo, a gulch, a dry stream bed, as it were. So the Wadi Arabah runs south from the Dead Sea to the Red Sea. If the Jordan River was really running and the Dead Sea were filled with water and ran out at the low end, it would continue to the Red Sea through the Wadi Arabah. The Mount Seir Road, he mentions here, would be running up the east rim of the Arabah, right by the ancient city of Petra. I've actually driven down that way in a rented Volkswagen back when Allie and I went down there alone to visit the rose-red city of Petra. It is really quite a trip, I will tell you, to go down there and actually see that place. That's somewhere near what would have been at one time the Mount Seir Road, which was the main route up from down at the Red Sea on up into the Middle East. The Exodus took place in about 1491 B.C. So because it's 40 years later, this event, when Moses gives this speech, is not far from 1450 B.C. Now, these dates get away from us, but it's, again, this, as I jokingly said this last Sabbath, this is going to be on the test, so don't let this date get away from you. Somewhere near 1450 B.C., Moses spoke Deuteronomy. Who wrote it down, and when did they write it? That information is not included in the record. Some scholars place Deuteronomy quite late, but I doubt that very seriously. Scholars, have to get published, and they won't be published if they just go too close to the obvious on everything and become, well, what shall I say, good Christians. So they have to get published. They have placed it down at various and sundry, and they've got the documentary hypothesis to deal with. And I don't think it's really worth our time to go into here. What our concern is, what does the record actually say? Well, it says in verse 3, in the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, just ready to turn over 41, Moses proclaimed to the Israelites all that the Lord had commanded him concerning them. This was after he had defeated Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who reigned in Heshbon, and at Adri, and had defeated Og, king of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth. Again, if you go to BibleMap.org, you can find Edrei. I don't know that you find the rest of these places. You may have to look a little further. If any of you find a really good map of this area and of these things, please drop me an email and tell me where it's at, because I would like to link to it so everybody can have a better shot at kind of understanding where they're at. Now, here's a question. Did it ever occur to you to wonder how Moses made this speech to the people of Israel? I once had to speak to about 500 people without amplification. That was in Chicago when I was a ministerial assistant and just getting started. Dean Blackwell was the pastor of the Chicago church at that time, and Dean had a voice, like a foghorn that could penetrate the darkness, and a set of vocal cords, I think, that must have been good quality leather. So he didn't have much problem with it. But for me, with my voice, which is a little more mellow than his, it was a problem. 500 people. It was in Wozniak's Lounge, of all places, in Chicago. And it was hard. It was exhausting to speak to 500 people. So how do you speak to 1 million people without it being on a radio or television or something like that? If I were in a class, we were in class, I would ask for your opinion on this. How in the world did they do this? So feel free to hit the pause button and talk it over amongst yourselves. How do you think Moses was able to give this speech to the entire nation of Israel without any electronic help at all? Well, the answer to this is really a little too obvious. It was done by delegation, I think. Moses may have spoken to 500 of the elders. each of which went out and spoke to 500 other elders, who then in turn went out to spoke to 500 more. So that's not really that hard to do. It was also obvious that this was written down. How can I say it was written down? Well, every one of you have it in your hands out there in writing. Someone somewhere sometime had to write this down. I suspect it was written before it was given. It would be the logical thing for Moses to do, but we don't know. It's just a guess. Moses continues in verse 5. East of the Jordan, in the territory of Moab, Moses began to expound this law, saying, The Lord our God said to us at Horeb, You have stayed long enough at this mountain. Break camp, advance into the hill country of the Amorites, go to all the neighboring peoples in the Arabah, in the mountains, in the western foothills, in the Negev, and along the coast, to the land of the Canaanites and to Lebanon, as far as the great river, the Euphrates. You know, you really have to kind of look at a map and try to get the picture of what he's talking about here. And he says, See, I have given you this land. Go in and take possession of the land that the Lord swore he would give to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to their descendants after them. You know, the Arabs should count their blessings that Israel has never tried to enforce that deed, because it was given to them, and they could go all the way to the Euphrates and possess that land. Well, Moses said, At that time I said to you, You are too heavy a burden for me to carry alone. Well, after he gave this speech that he's given, now you'd sure think so. The Lord your God has increased your numbers so that today you are as many as the stars of the sky. I gather from that there were a lot more Israelites now than came out of Egypt. A lot of babies born along the way. May the Lord, the God of your fathers, increase you 1,000 times and bless you as he has promised. But how can I bear your problems and your burdens and your disputes all by myself? Moses was not only the lawgiver, he was the judiciary. He was a one-man government, and it was needful for it to be that way at this point in time. But as he says, I can't handle all this. I mean, you people have managed to come up with more lawsuits than any one man could handle. Choose some wise, understanding, and respected men from each of your tribes. I will set them over you. Now, this is really interesting because it has to involve something like a democratic process to choose these men. Somebody had to sit down and talk about, okay, who are we going to nominate to Moses to take care of this in our tribe? Well, there's old Barzillai over there, and there's this guy, and start ticking them off and discussing their qualifications. And they recommended them, nominated them for Moses, who in turn appointed them. You answered me, what you propose to do is good. So I took the leading men of your tribes, wise and respected men, and appointed them to have authority over you as commanders of thousands, hundreds of fifties, of tens, and as tribal officers. And I charged your judges at that time, hear the disputes between your brothers and judge fairly, whether the case is between brother Israelites or between one of them and an alien. It doesn't make any difference if the person is an alien. Do not show partiality in judging. Hear both small and great alike. Do not be afraid of any man, for judgment belongs to God. Bring me any case too hard for you, and I will hear it. Now, at this point, I have a comment from Peter Kamen, and I'll read it to you now. He said, Since you'll be starting Deuteronomy in the weekend Bible study, I request that you address Deuteronomy 1:13, especially in light of the hierarchy proponents contending that Exodus 18 instructs leaders to appoint other leaders under them. I have problems with Exodus 18, but it bothers me how many people simply ignore inconvenient scriptures like Deuteronomy 1:13. Related to Exodus 18, I continue to quote, Here is how I simplify it. Moses was burdened, and Jethro's solution was to provide men to help him. In Numbers 11, Moses was yet again burdened, and God's solution was to provide men to help him. The difference? Jethro's solution was hierarchical, and God's wasn't. Another interesting contrast is that Jethro's solution apparently involved the people selecting the leaders, while God's solution involved Moses selecting the leaders. Well, I suppose that's true, except that in this case it's very much like the selection of the deacons. I don't know if you notice the comparison or not in Acts 6, where they said, "Look you out among you 7 men of honest report, whom we may put over this business." How'd they do that? Well, I think the people nominated and the apostles appointed. But I don't really understand the hierarchical arguments for several reasons. One is that the governance of the time in the wilderness and during the conquest was different from what the governance was in the land. If there is one thing that is clear in Judges, it is that there was no central government per se. There were tribal elders, there were tribal judges, regional guys in the city of refuge and so forth, and Samuel was the chief judge of what we might call the Supreme Court. But the people were freer there than they ever had been or ever would be again. And all this is utterly irrelevant to the governance in the church. We aren't in the desert. We aren't on a campaign of conquest. We live in a free land so far, and our officials are chosen from the bottom up. So I'm not sure what Peter's driving at here. Maybe he'd like to write again and clarify it, because it does sound to me like, both in Acts and in a couple of these instances, that the people were involved in nomination of those who were going to be appointed to the tasks that were there. But even then, it doesn't really much pertain to what the governance is going to be in the Church of God. Going on now with Deuteronomy 1, verse 18. "At that time I told you everything you were to do. Then, as the Lord our God commanded us, we set out from Horeb and went toward the hill country of the Amorites, through all that vast and dreadful desert that you have seen, and so we reached Kadesh Barnea. Then I said to you, you have reached the hill country of the Amorites, which the Lord our God is giving to us." Now, Kadesh has been a problem forever with people trying to identify its location. The BibleMaps.org that I pointed out to you has it stuck way off up in the north, and I don't really think so. We'll look into it maybe a little more later on. So if you find anything out there and doing your research, be sure and let us know. But anyhow, some of these areas we know, some of them we have to guess at. "See, the Lord your God has given you the land. Go up and take possession of it as the Lord, the God of your fathers, told you to do. Don't be afraid. Don't be discouraged." Then all of you came to me and said, "Let's send men ahead to spy out the land for us and bring back a report about the route we are to take and the towns we will come to." Now, I don't know why it was so, but for some reason I had not stumbled to the fact that it was the people who wanted to send the spies into the land. I guess I thought Moses decided that. I don't know that God told him to do it, but no. God didn't need spies to go in and spy out the land. And when you think about it that way, it makes sense that the people would be the source of it. It's important to know that. Now, Moses says, "The idea seemed good to me, so I selected 12 of you, one man from each tribe. They left and went up into the hill country. They came to the valley of Eshcol and explored it. Taking with them some of the fruit of the land, they brought it down to us and reported, 'It is a good land that the Lord our God is giving us.' So they brought back samples of fruit, and they said, 'Boy, this place is good.' But you were unwilling to go up. You rebelled against the command of the Lord your God. You grumbled in your tents and said, 'The Lord hates us.'" Oh, brother, where have we heard that expression before? And the problem is really a fairly simple one. The guys who went up in the land not only told them what a good land it was, they also told them what they were going to have to fight against in order to get it, and they were scared by it. And they scared the people with their report. The minority report coming from Caleb and Joshua was, "Oh, no. Let's go up and take this land because we are more than capable of doing it. It can be ours, but we're going to have to fight for it." Now, this is a thing that I feel all too often we as Christian people forget. Yes, God will bless us. Yes, God will open doors. Yes, God will fight on our behalf. The problem is, He will not fight on our behalf while we sit back in our recliners and watch. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, you have got to go out there yourself and fight for your land at the risk of your life. Because if you go out there to fight, the fight can go a lot of different ways. Time and chance happens to all men. But it was your idea to spy out the land. They came back and told us it was a wonderful land. God's going to give it to us. And you were unwilling. You were afraid when you got the full report. You grumbled in your tents and said, "The Lord hates us. So He brought us out of Egypt to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us." Good grief. How much do people have to see before they'll shape up and say, "Oh no, God loves us. He doesn't hate us. We can make this." But the one key is we have got to be willing to fight for it. "Where can we go?" they said. "Our brothers have made us lose heart. They say the people are stronger and taller than we are, and the cities are large with walls up to the sky. We even saw the Anakites there." Anakites. Is there an Anakin Skywalker in the Star Wars thing? I wonder where they got that name. Moses said, "Then I said to you, don't be terrified, don't be afraid of them. The Lord your God is going before you, will fight for you as He did in Egypt, before your very eyes, and in the desert. There you saw how the Lord your God carried you like a father carries his son all the way you went until you reached this place." Now, God's been with us up to this place. Why do you think He did it? Because He hates us. In spite of this, you did not trust the Lord your God, who went ahead of you on your journey in fire by night and a cloud by day, to search out the places for you to camp and to show you the way you should go. He actually pointed out campsites for them. When the Lord heard what you said, He was angry, and He solemnly swore, "Not a man of this evil generation shall see the good land I swore to your forefathers, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh. He will see it. I will give him and his descendants the land he set his feet on." Why? Because he followed the Lord wholeheartedly. "Because of you, the Lord became angry with me and said, 'You shall not enter the land either. But your assistant, Joshua the son of Nun, will enter it. Encourage him, for he will lead Israel to inherit it.'" But folks, this was not an easy inheritance to take. They had to fight for it. "The little ones that you said would be taken captive, your children who do not yet know good from bad, they will enter the land. I will give it to them. They will take possession of it. But as for you, turn around and set out toward the desert along the route to the Red Sea." And then you replied, "Oh, well, we have sinned against the Lord. We will go up and fight as God commanded us." It is so human the way this happens. "So you all put on your weapons, thinking it easy to go up into the hill country. But the Lord said to me, 'Tell them, do not go up and fight, because I will not be with you. You will be defeated by your enemies.'" One of the interesting things about David, when you read his story, time and again, when the time for battle comes, he asks God first, "Shall I go up?" And God says, "Go up. I'll deliver them." So, verse 43, God says, "I told you, but you would not listen. You rebelled against the Lord's command, and in your arrogance you marched up into the hill country. The Amorites who live in those hills came out against you. They chased you like a swarm of bees and beat you down from Seir all the way down to Hormah. And you came back and wept before the Lord, but he paid no attention to your weeping and turned a deaf ear to you. And so you stayed in Kadesh many days, all the time you spent there." This story is so human. It's the way we are. We face a challenge and we back down and we become aware that God's angry with us. Well, okay, I'll do it after all. And God says, no, don't do it this time. And we go right ahead. Whatever God seems to tell us to do, we do the opposite. And one wonders just what it would take for us to get ourselves together, to get our act together, and stop that approach to life. Well, that's Deuteronomy chapter 1. Take a quick break, and we'll come back for chapter 2. Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 1. Then we turned back and set out toward the desert along the route to the Red Sea as the Lord had directed me. For a long time we made our way around the hill country of Seir. Seir, some sources say, is Petra. The Lord said to me, "You have made your way around this hill country long enough. Now turn north. Give the people these orders." Quote, "You are about to pass through the territory of your brothers, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir. They will be afraid of you, but be very careful. Do not provoke them to war, for I will not give you any of their land, not even enough to put your foot on. I have given Esau the hill country of Seir as his own." Now that's interesting. The promise of the original inheritance of everything all the way from the Nile River to the Euphrates was offered to Abraham's descendants. Well, these are Abraham's descendants, and they're going to have to be left strictly alone as they go through there. You are to pay them in silver for the food you eat and the water you drink. The Lord your God has blessed you in all the work of your hands. He has watched over your journey through this vast desert. These 40 years your God has been with you, and you have never lacked a thing. So we went on past our brothers, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir. We turned from the Arabah road, which comes up from Elath and Ezion-Geber, and traveled along the desert road of Moab. Now, Elath, I believe, is the port of Eilat, right at the top of the Red Sea and the bottom of Israel and of Jordan. So they were coming up along that desert road to the right of the Arabah, or to the east of it, coming north. The Lord said to me, "Do not harass the Moabites or provoke them to war, for I will not give you any part of their land. I have given Ar to the descendants of Lot as a possession." I believe you will find Ar, A-R, on that map that I gave you. The Emites, verse 10, used to live there, a people strong and numerous and as tall as the Anakites. Like the Anakites, they too were considered Rephaites, but the Moabites called them Emites. Well, all that seems a little irrelevant to us today, but some of these things, it's surprising when you go look them up, the insights that will come your way. I'll leave it to you to do that as you feel led. The Horites used to live in Mount Seir, but the descendants of Esau drove them out. They destroyed the Horites from before them and settled in their place, just like Israel did in the land God gave them as their possession. Now, the Lord said, "Get up and cross the Zered Valley." So we crossed the valley. 38 years passed from the time we left Kadesh Barnea until we crossed the Zered Valley. By then, that entire generation of fighting men had perished from the camp as the Lord had sworn to them. The Lord's hand was against them until he had utterly eliminated them from the camp. Now when the last of these fighting men among the people had died, the Lord said to me, "Today you are to pass by the region of Moab at Ar. When you come to the Ammonites, do not harass them, do not provoke them to war. I will not give you possession of any land that belongs to the Ammonites. I have given it as a possession to the descendants of Lot. Moab and Ammon were brothers. They were the sons of Lot that he actually engendered by his own daughters." Tragic situation. Well, that too was considered a land of the Rephaites who used to live there. The Ammonites called them the Zamzumites. They were a people strong and numerous and as tall as the Anakites. Those guys must have been something else. They were NBA material. The Lord destroyed them from before the Ammonites, who drove them out and settled in their place. The Lord had done the same for the descendants of Esau, who lived in Seir, when he destroyed the Horites from before them. They drove them out and have lived in their place to this day. Also for the Avites, who lived in the villages as far as Gaza, the Caphtorites coming out from Caphtor destroyed them and settled in their place. I mean, it's just, you really do kind of wonder, it is a little bit fascinating, how they repeatedly in Israel, they recount all of this history. I really think that it is something they did more often than we realize, that it isn't just something they did on the occasions we have recorded here. I have an idea that campfire talk, generation after generation, involved discussions of who did what to whom and when they did it and why they did it. I can remember so much as a kid. You know, we were living there in northwest Arkansas. I was out on the porch. I'd be playing with cars or fooling around. The dogs would be lying there, you know, trying to get rid of their fleas and flies. And our parents, my sister and I there, and our parents would be sitting on the deck talking to other relatives who were by visiting. And they would run down this whole history of stuff having to do with World War II. And they would talk about it. And the question, you know, they said there's the king of the North and the king of the South. And they were speculating hours on end about what all that stuff meant. So something like this went on in the camps and the firesides of Israel all during these years. Okay, verse 24. Set out now and cross the Arnon Gorge. See, I have given into your hand Sihon, the Amorite, the king of Heshbon, his whole country. Begin to take possession of it and engage him in battle. Now, it's worth a moment just for you to take it some time and locate the river Arnon, which enters the Dead Sea from the east. The river Arnon marks the northern border of Moab. Going north from there, it's all non-Israelite, non-Moabite, not Ammonite, not Esau, not any of these people, not sons of Abraham at all. These are the people who have settled in this land. We're going to drive them out. So, set out and cross the Arnon Gorge. I have given to your hand the Sihon, the Amorite, the king of Heshbon, his country. Engage him in battle. This very day I will begin to put the terror and fear of you on all the nations under heaven. They will hear reports of you and will tremble and be in anguish of you. From the desert of Kedemoth I send messengers to Sihon, the king of Heshbon, offering peace and saying, let us pass through your country. We will stay on the main road. We will not turn aside to the right or the left. You can sell us food to eat and water to drink for their price in silver. Just let us go through on foot, as the descendants of Esau who live in Seir and the Moabites who live in Ar did for us, until we cross the Jordan into the land which God is giving us. But Sihon, the king of Heshbon, refused to let us pass through, for the Lord your God had made his spirit stubborn and his heart obstinate in order to give him into your hands as he has now done. You know, looking down on this thing from God's position, he could see that you can't make deals with people like the Ammonites. They're going to betray you and stab you in the back every time. You're going to have to defeat them. And that is precisely what is being set up when this took place. The Lord said to me, see, I have begun to deliver Sihon and his country over to you. Now begin to conquer and possess his land. When Sihon and all his army came out to meet us in battle at Jahaz, the Lord our God delivered him over to us, and we struck him down, together with his sons and his whole army. At that time we took all his towns and completely destroyed them. Men, women, and children, we left no survivors. But the livestock and the plunder from the towns we had captured, we carried off for ourselves. Kind of a sad story, isn't it, of the things that had to be done? But there were some of these people that just basically needed to be wiped out, for they would always be a problem if they were left in place. By the way, so that you understand this, there was work done for the conquering of the land that was theirs from the north of the river Ar, or Arnon, right on up. They had, before Moses died, they had already started the conquest of the Transjordan area. From Aroer, verse 36, on the rim of the Arnon Gorge, and from the town in the gorge, even as far as Gilead, not one town was too strong for us. The Lord our God gave us all of them. But in accordance with the command of our God, you did not encroach on any of the land of the Ammonites, neither the land in the course of the Jabbok River, nor that around towns and hills. So, you did what you were told, which frankly is remarkable in the history of Israel. Well, that's as far as we're going to go for today. We'll come back next week, and we'll tackle Deuteronomy 3. There is an enormous amount of good stuff ahead of us. We'll talk to you again next week. Meanwhile, get in touch, make your comments, your questions to me, Ron at borntowin.net. Till next time.